We begin in Sudan, where the two warring parties are blaming each other after a 24-hour humanitarian ceasefire failed to take effect as agreed upon between the two sides, just minutes after it was due to begin. David Doyle explains.
This is the sound of a 24-hour ceasefire in Sudan being shattered, just minutes after it came into effect. The truce, agreed by the country's warring generals under US pressure, was intended to provide some respite to civilians now living under the shadow of warplanes. Instead, shortly after it was due to take hold at 6 p.m. local time on Tuesday, tank fire and loud shooting could be heard in Khartoum. Several witnesses reported a large ground army entering the capital from the east.
We have not had any confirmation or indication that this is holding.
At a briefing shortly after the deadline, UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric described fighting in Khartoum with jets, heavy artillery and small arms.
It is creating a climate that is extremely dangerous for civilians and by definition for our staff, humanitarian staff, diplomatic staff, and that's why we continue to engage with the parties in order to try to get a solid cessation of hostilities.
On Tuesday, the UN's aid chief said they were receiving reports of attacks and sexual violence against aid workers. The World Food Programme suspended operations after 3 of its employees were killed. The violence erupted on Saturday out of a power struggle between Sudan's military leader and his deputy. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan heads a ruling council installed after a 2021 military coup and the 2019 ouster of longtime autocratic leader Omar al-Bashir. General Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, better known as Hemeti, is his number 2 and also leads the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. Both sides, the army and the RSF, issued statements accusing each other of failing to respect the ceasefire. The fighting has derailed a transition to civilian rule and triggered what the UN described as a humanitarian catastrophe, including the near collapse of the health system. At least 185 people have been killed and many more injured.
David Doyle of Reuters filed that report. For more on the impact of the fighting in Sudan, reporter Sid Ahmed Ibrahim spoke to people in Khartoum.
My name is Al-Noor Abbas. I'm a student and I live in Al-Daim neighborhood in Khartoum. We left our neighborhood because of the heavy bombardment of the Air Force and the continuous anti-aircraft guns. We came to the Jabra neighborhood, which is not considered completely safe either due to the presence of some battles in it as well. Now we are looking for a safe place to shelter us in the absence of water and food in the difficult situations we are currently living in. We ask God to be kind to us.
The situation is getting worse every day due to several factors, including insecurity and the interruption of water and electricity since the beginning of the events. We, as civilians, do not know what to do, and we do not know the truth about the party that controls matters in light of this fluctuation in the situation.
I am from White Nile State. The reason we were forced to leave Khartoum is that it has become very unsafe. Yesterday, our neighbor was shot, and today a bullet hit our yard. There is no safe place in the capital now, so we are forced to leave. We wish peace and safety for those who are still going to stay in Khartoum, and that no harm will happen to them, and we pray for them. But I think it is better for them to leave to preserve their safety.
People on the streets of Khartoum speaking to VOA. And as the conflict in Sudan continues into its 5th day, citizens are fleeing Khartoum to find safety and basic necessities. For more on the situation, VOA's Antonella Bruto spoke to Widad Darwish, a Sudanese activist, about the current situation and why she is fleeing the country.
In the Fidel hospital in the center of Khartoum, the Ministry of Health is getting launched that because they pumping the hospital with the heavy weapons, and it have a lot of people, patients there. So this is one of a lot of examples, and right now we have 18 hospitals, they're locked. So the situation, the humanitarian situation is so hard. As also the humanitarian situations, there is a lot of dead bodies in the street right now, and this is really big health problem. Also, there is no security. Many people kill each other and stole each other in the street of some areas in Khartoum.
What are some of the reasons that people are fleeing the capital now? What have you seen?
The reason is not new. Before this civilian or this war, they are poor, and the economic is not stable. So the war coming worse to worse. So of course they should went out to get some food or something to eat, and the country of course is not helping people, so they will trying to help themselves, and the situation is crisis, and the people they running out from the Khartoum. Even right now, some of Rasian groups, they connected together to send trucks, buses, big vehicles to bring their relative from the country to outside. They're sending this. So all the people they're running out from Khartoum.
That was Widad Darwish, a Sudanese activist, speaking to VOA's Anthony Labruto. The conflict in Sudan is provoking global calls for a ceasefire, but questions remain about how other countries can persuade the combatants in Khartoum to lay down their weapons. U.S. officials say they're using Washington's status and limited leverage in an attempt to make peace. VOA's Anita Powell has more.
Fighting has raged in Sudan's capital since Saturday, as two of the nation's power players battle for dominance, with civilians caught in the middle. The top U.S. diplomat said he delivered a message to the heads of the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces.
This morning, I made calls to Generals Burhan and Hamedi, urging them to agree to a 24-hour ceasefire, to allow Sudanese to safely reunite with their families, and to obtain desperately needed relief supplies.
General Abdel Fattah Burhan joined forces with General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, better known as Hamedi, to mount a 2021 coup. But they then turned on each other. And earlier this month, protesters took to Khartoum's streets after talks on a transition to civilian governance stalled. The White House says it is working hard to bring about peace, but declined to say what the consequences would be if the warring parties didn't listen.
We've been very clear about the importance of de-escalating, and you've heard Secretary Blinken speak to this. You heard my colleague from NSC speak to this as well. And so I'm just not going to go beyond to what they have said.
U.S. lawmakers familiar with the continent say the stakes are high.
I have not given up hope that there is still a path towards an end to the violence, but we need to prepare for the very real possibility that Sudan is about to descend into all-out civil war. My concern is that this may quickly become a proxy war.
Analysts say the U.S. has little room to maneuver. Washington's ties with Khartoum have long been strained, and the U.S. suspended assistance to Sudan during the 2021 coup.
Well, I think the challenge here is that the leverage that Washington has left is not leverage that it wants to put on the table, and that's the use of punitive measures. I think for the last 6 months, you've seen Washington, and even since the coup, using an engagement strategy and an incentive strategy to try to bring the generals around to relinquishing power. The problem is that in Sudan's history, these generals don't have a history of responding to incentives. Just like they govern the country through fear, intimidation, and their own punitive measures, that's what they respond to themselves.
Kuhn says this needs to be a team effort.
We do have some leverage, but there's other players in the region that also have a lot at stake and some leverage, and we need to work with them in close coordination.
That work has begun with the Arab League, Egypt, and the United Nations all saying they will work towards peace. But how soon can they put out the flames in Khartoum? Anita Powell, VOA News, the White House.
A Zimbabwean actress battling cancer is asking wealthy citizens to buy a radiotherapy machine for government hospitals because she says the country's only unit has stopped working. As Columbus Mavunga reports from Harare, many blame Zimbabwe's high mortality rate among cancer patients on the country's poor state of healthcare.
Tinopona Tintin Katsande, a Zimbabwean actress, says she's almost done with her treatment for cervical cancer at a private hospital. She says the government hospitals had no working radiotherapy machines, so her family helped raise money for radiation therapy at a private hospital. Katsande says she has met other cancer patients who have not been so lucky.
My peers that I have met in support groups, just when I penned that, I had lost 6. I lost 6 women with such potential and with such vibe and with such power that had been taken down, through cervical cancer, particularly even, because treatment cannot be completed without the service of the radiotherapy.
Jennifer Juliet Mgonda from Kadoma, a mining town about a 2-hour drive southwest of Harare, has cancer too. She says doctors at a local government hospital asked her to stop going there and seek help at a private hospital about 400 kilometers away near Zimbabwe's border with Mozambique. She has not been treated for cancer for about 3 years now. She fears for the worst.
I am still surviving, but I know where I am going. Cancer kills. So I am finished. So what I know is my failure to get treatment is leading to my death.
Zimbabwe's Ministry of Health did not confirm or deny claims that government hospitals have no working radiotherapy machines and declined VOA's request for further comment. Katsande is asking the country's wealthy citizens to help people like Mgonda.
Some way, somehow, we've got to come together to buy at least 1 radiotherapy machine. You cannot holistically treat cancer without a full treatment, and one important part of it is the radiotherapy. Without the machine, that cannot be done.
According to Zimbabwe's latest figures, the number of new cancer cases more than doubled to 7,800 from 2009 to 2019. The Zimbabwe Cancer Registry says about 85% of cancer patients delay treatment until it's too late.
The cost of treatment is high, and also the knowledge among the population is very limited. Cancer knowledge is very limited, so a lot of people are likely to delay to be diagnosed of the disease.
Meanwhile, Jennifer Juliet Mgonda is trying to raise money so that she can finally get the medication and treatment she needs at a distant private hospital. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Harare, Zimbabwe.
An activist in Ghana is swimming the nearly 500-kilometer-long Volta River, including Lake Volta, to bring attention to worsening water pollution. Yvette Tete, who will swim several hours per day for over a month, is also collecting water samples along the way to test for pollution. Senanu Todd reports from Lake Volta, Ghana.
Ghana's Lake Volta is the world's largest man-made lake by surface area, and activist Yvette Tete is swimming its entire length as part of her swim across the Volta River's almost 500 kilometers. In less than a month, Tete swam 300 kilometers, up to 14 per day, to raise awareness on Ghana's worsening water pollution.
There's no action that people take unless they care. And so what we're doing with this swim is just basically
bringing people into the experience of what it feels like, what it is to be in this absolutely incredible part of Ghana, and to show them it is worth it to bring our attention to the space, to make sure that we're preserving the beauty.
Tete is accompanied by researchers from the All Foundation, which is supporting her swim and advocates against textile waste. They are collecting water and air samples along the way to study what is driving water pollution. Ghana imports about 50 million pieces of second-hand clothes each week, but the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change says about 40% of it ends up in landfills and then in water.
The number of clothing tentacles at the beachfronts and water bodies has increased over time. Now, microfibers and chemicals from these items of clothing that are overrun across the beaches leach into the water and end up polluting the water for the communities that live in and around the water bodies.
The United Nations says 76% of Ghanaian households are at the risk of drinking contaminated water. Ecological researcher Joe Siao Ayesu is leading the All Foundation's team. He says the team hopes its research will cause clothing manufacturers to be held accountable for waste products shipped to Ghana, and this will be done through a system known as the Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR.
The main aim of the OR is to push EPR policy to the global north, that's Europe and America, for the harm being done to us by manufacturing clothes and pushing it down the line for us to face the consequences. And so the data that we get will be, it's an evidence.
Tete says by completing the swim, she hopes to inspire others to protect the environment, one stroke at a time. Sana Anutot for VOA News, Lake Volta, Ghana.
You're watching Africa 54 from the Voice of America here in Washington, D.C. Still to come, Kenya launches its first operational observation satellite. We'll tell you why shortly. But first, Hedy Adams tells us what's coming up on Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa. Stay with us.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, heavy fighting erupts in the Sudanese capital as rival generals battle for control of the country. What issues are at the heart of the conflict? Is Sudan headed for an all-out civil war? Join me, Hedy Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
In other news, the Central African Republic Justice Minister Arnaud Djoubaya, citing an investigation, says the Coalition of Patriots for Change, a leading rebel group, is behind the murder of 9 Chinese gold miners last month. The CPC, an alliance of rebel groups formed in December 2020 to overthrow President Faustin Archange Touadera, is denying carrying out the killings. Authorities in Chad say clashes between Fulani herders and farmers from the Kodo community in southern Chad have left at least 22 people dead. Chadian officials are accusing rebels based in neighboring Central African Republic of igniting the conflict. And 8 schoolgirls have escaped from kidnappers in Nigeria's northwest Kaduna State 2 weeks after they were abducted on their way to school. The Kaduna State Internal Affairs Commissioner says the girls were students at the government secondary school, Awon, in Kachia district. A Russian court is refusing to release U.S. journalist Evan Gershkovich from jail while he awaits trial on accusations that he spied on Russia while on a reporting assignment last month. VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain reports.
Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich made his first public appearance in a Moscow courtroom Tuesday after being arrested nearly 3 weeks ago on espionage charges. The 31-year-old reporter asked to be detained under house arrest while awaiting trial, but the judge ruled that he must remain in jail. Gershkovich's Russian lawyer spoke to reporters after the hearing.
He would like to prove that he is not guilty, and he would like to prove that there is place for freedom of journalistic.
U.S. Ambassador to Russia Lynn Tracy spoke to reporters after the hearing.
I can only say how troubling it was to see Evan, an innocent journalist, held in these circumstances. I was able to meet Evan yesterday at Lefordova prison. It was the first time we were granted consular access since his wrongful detention more than 2 weeks ago. I can report that he is in good health and remains strong despite his circumstances. We will continue to provide all appropriate support to Evan and his family, and we expect Russian authorities to provide continued consular access to Evan. The charges against Evan are baseless, and we call on the Russian Federation to immediately release him.
Russia claims, without producing evidence, that Gershkovich was caught red-handed while spying, collecting what it claimed were state secrets about a military-industrial complex. The Wall Street Journal and the U.S. government have rejected the charge of espionage, which, if he were to be convicted, carries a sentence of up to 20 years in prison. The U.S. State Department last week declared that Gershkovich is wrongfully detained. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre condemned the Moscow court ruling and also called for the immediate release of U.S. citizen Paul Whelan, whom the U.S. has also designated as wrongfully detained.
Look, we're deeply concerned by the news that Russia will continue to wrongfully detain Evan following a sham judicial proceeding today. And that's what we saw earlier today. The Biden-Harris administration is engaging with Russia through every available channel to bring Evan and fellow American Paul Whelan home, who is also a priority for us.
I am innocent of any charge resulting from this potential kidnapping.
Former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan has been held in Russia for more than 4 years. The U.S. says both Gershkovich and Whelan deserve to go home to their families. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
Now to East Africa, where Kenya is using the launch of its first operational observation satellite to promote space education and science through space clubs in schools. Kenya launched an operational 3U nanosatellite on April 15th aboard the SpaceX Falcon 4 based in the U.S. Victoria Munga reports from Nairobi.
Satellite images that we're seeing over here, it's that right now there's a lot of fragmented land.
Students at St. Scholastica Catholic School in Nairobi explore space technology applications. The learners are members of the School Space Science Club, an extension of an educational program established by Kenya's Space Agency to promote space education. The students were asked to study their local town.
So the information that the satellite images are telling us between
13-year-old Ryan Gauna says participating in this club has sparked his interest in engineering.
Electrical engineering when it comes to setting up the satellites or maybe even rockets. So that these are now baby steps, especially from the nanotech that was released in 2018. So from that I really want to try and just do something bigger than what's happening today.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
Kenya's Taifa 1 satellite, which means Nation 1 in Swahili, is the first operational satellite the country has launched this year aboard the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket in the U.S. state of California. In 2018, Kenya stepped into space with the launch of its first nano satellite called CubeSat. Authorities with Kenya Space Agency say they are reaching out to young students to encourage them to consider a future in the space technology.
The conversation that has been happening within the education sector is that many people are not taking science or technology-related subjects, and these are the subject that feeds into the space sector, and we are keen to have them early enough to understand the potential and the opportunities that the sector presents for them.
At least 30 schools have enrolled in the outreach programs, and the agency says it plans to add space technology learning to more school curricula.
With the science and technology, there is investment that has been done in that curriculum for coding. We now have coding in grade 4, 5, 6, and now in grade 7, which is the junior secondary, they have come up with computer studies as an optional subject.
The observation satellite Taifa 1 will be used to provide data on agriculture and food security, among other areas. It was designed and developed by Kenyan engineers like Maureen Wanjiru.
It is exciting and being part of innovative and creative ideas that push, that make an impact in our country in terms of climate change, in terms of agriculture, forestry.
Entirely funded by the Kenyan government, the Taifa 1 satellite was manufactured and tested in collaboration with a Bulgarian aerospace manufacturer. The launch marks the latest push by African nations to boost space innovation and development. Victoria Amunga for VOA News, Nairobi.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.